Have you ever wondered why Gen Z avoids the stock market? What if the safest financial decision your parents ever taught you is quietly making you poorer every single year? Right now, there's a generation that watch their parents play by every rule in the book. Save your money, build an emergency fund, don't spend what you don't have. And somehow those parents still ended up stressed about retirement, buried in medical debt, or watching their savings lose value while everything around them got more expensive. Gen Z looked at that outcome and said, why would we do the same thing? But here's what almost nobody talks about. They're not avoiding the stock market because they're reckless. They're avoiding it because they watch the system punish the people who did everything right. And if you actually understand how inflation works, their instinct makes perfect sense. See, we've all been told inflation is when prices go up. That's technically true, but that definition hides the most important part. Inflation doesn't hurt everyone equally. In fact, it's designed to reward one group of people and quietly drain wealth from another. And which group you're in has almost nothing to do with how hard you work. Let me show you the math most people never do. Let's say it's 2020. You've got $20,000 saved up. You worked for it. You didn't blow it on dumb stuff. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. You put it in a savings account. The bank pays you 0.5% interest, maybe 1% if you're lucky. You feel responsible. You feel safe. Fast forward to today, 2026. That same $20,000 is still sitting there. Actually, it's a little more now. Maybe $2,600 more if you got decent interest. But here's the part they don't put on the bank statement. In 2020, $20,000 could buy you a used Honda Civic in decent shape. It could cover a year of rent in a mid-sized city. It could pay for a solid health insurance deductible and still leave you a cushion. Today, that same $2,600 might get you 8 months of rent. The used Civic costs $30,000 now. Your deductible went up. Your groceries cost twice what they did before. You didn't spend $1. You were disciplined. You saved. And you still lost because inflation ran at an average of around 4 to 5% during those years. Your money grew at 1%. You fell behind by 3 to 4% every single year. That's not a market crash. That's not bad luck. That's the system working exactly as intended. And here's the kicker. The bank that paid you 1% interest, they took your money and loaded out at 7, 8, maybe 12%. They made the spread, you took the loss. Now let's flip the script. Let's talk about the other side of this equation. The side that nobody wants to say out loud because it sounds too cynical to be true. Inflation doesn't just hurt savers, it rewards debtors. Let's say in 2020, someone takes out a 30-year mortgage, $300,000, fixed interest rate 4%. Their monthly payment is about $1,400. That's a stretch, but they make it work. Now fast forward to 2026. Inflation happened. Wages went up. Not as much as prices, but they went up. That person who is making $60,000 a year in 2020 is now making $70,000, maybe $75,000. Their mortgage payment is still $1,400, same number, but it feels lighter now. It's a smaller percentage of their paycheck. Meanwhile, if they wanted to buy that same house today, it would cost them $500,000, and the interest rate would be 7%. They locked in cheap money before inflation hit, and now inflation is working for them. Every year, inflation makes their debt easier to pay. Every year, the real value of what they owe shrinks. They borrowed $300,000 in 2020, but they're paying it back in 2026, which are worth less. It's not a hack, it's not a trick, it's just how the math works when the value of money goes down. And here's the uncomfortable part. The system is built this way on purpose. The Federal Reserve targets 2% inflation every year. Not 0, not negative, 2%. They want your money to lose value slowly, predictably, forever. Why? Because it keeps people spending, it keeps people borrowing, it keeps the economy moving. But it also means savers get crushed and debtors get rewarded as long as they can keep making payments. So now go back to Gen Z. They watched their parents save diligently and lose purchasing power. They watched housing prices explode. They watched education costs double. They watched wages stagnate while rent went vertical. And they looked at the stock market, this thing their parents said was the key to wealth, and they saw something different. They saw risk without a guarantee, volatility without control, a system that rewards people who already have money to lose. Because here's the truth about the stock market that nobody says clearly enough. It works great if you can afford to leave your money alone for decades. If you got extra cash every month, if you don't need to pull it out for an emergency, if you can ride out the crashes and the corrections and the random disasters that tank everything for 6 months. But if you're 24 and living paycheck to paycheck and your car breaks down or your health insurance doesn't cover something or you lose your job, you can't afford to wait for the market to recover. You need that money now. And if you have to sell during a downturn, you lock in losses. So the stock market isn't actually risky for rich people. It's risky for people who can't afford to be patient. And Gen Z knows this. They've seen it. They watched 2008 hit their parents. They watched COVID crash the market in 2020. They watched inflation spike in 2022, and the Fed hike rates, and suddenly everyone's retirement accounts were down 15, 20%. And the advice they got was, don't worry, just hold on, it'll come back. Which is true if you can afford to hold on. But that's a big if. Meanwhile, they're sitting on cash that's losing value, they're renting apartments that cost more every year, they're paying off student loans with interest rates that make no sense, and they're being told the solution is to put money into a market that could drop 30% tomorrow. It feels like a rigged game. And in a lot of ways, it is, because the stock market rewards capital. If you have money, you can make more money. But if you're starting from zero, or worse, starting from debt, the system doesn't care how hard you work. It cares how much you have. And here's where it gets even weirder. The people who benefit most from inflation, the ones holding assets, real estate, stocks, businesses, they don't feel like winners either. They feel stressed too, because prices are going up for them as well. They're paying more for everything, just like everyone else. But their wealth is inflating with the system. The house they bought is worth more. The stocks they own are worth more, at least on paper. The gap just keeps widening. And most people don't even realize it's happening. So let's zoom out for a second. Inflation is not a natural disaster. It's a policy choice. Governments and central banks could target zero inflation or even deflation, where money gains value over time. But they don't, because deflation makes people hold onto their cash. It slows down spending. It makes debt harder to pay. It can spiral into economic stagnation. So instead, they choose inflation, a slow, steady transfer of value from people who save to people who borrow and invest. And that choice has consequences. It means if you work hard and save your paycheck, you lose. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the system devalues your discipline. It means if you take on debt to buy assets, you win, as long as you can service the debt and the assets appreciate. It means wealth compounds for people who already have it, and people starting from scratch fall further behind, even if they're doing everything they're told to do. Gen Z didn't invent this skepticism. They inherited an economy where the math doesn't add up for them, where playing it safe guarantees you lose, where taking risks feels like gambling with money you don't have. And so they're opting out, not because they're lazy, not because they don't understand, but because they understand better than the generation before them. They see the stock market for what it is, a tool that works if you have time, capital, and security, and most of them don't have all three. So here's the question nobody wants to ask out loud. If saving makes you poor and investing requires money you don't have and wages can't keep up with inflation and the system rewards people who are already ahead, what exactly are you supposed to do? That's not rhetorical. That's the actual question an entire generation is sitting with right now. And the fact that there's no easy answer should tell you everything you need to know about how the game is set up. Think about that.